welcome for this adventure. This is very new to science education around the world. I don't know of any other course that has been focused on teaching science media literacy, not just to students, but to teachers who will teach it. So we are going to work together and learn from each other. The course will be organized so that I will present in English, and you have various readings, some are required, yes, that will be in English, but most of the rest of the class will be in Portuguese, and this should make things easier for you, just so you know, okay? To begin, we have a short presentation that is for you as teachers. Much of the rest of the class will be me being a science teacher and you being science students, and experiencing what you may then turn around and teach other students. But for now, this is for you, so I want you to close notebooks, close laptops, and just listen, because this is an overview of what we will be doing more slowly over the next 3 days, okay? Except maybe you need to open them again, because the very first thing is I want to know what questions you have about science media literacy that you hope this class will address or answer, or things that you are interested in knowing. And then I will collect these and look at them tonight and see if we are on track, or if we need to like change things or modify things over the next 2 days, okay? So to begin, if you have a sheet of paper or a small thing to write electronically that you can send, what questions do you have about science misinformation or teaching science misinformation? Good? Okay, so 3 to 5 minutes to put this on paper so we can check this later, okay? Okay, and you can now draw a line underneath that because we will add to these later. Okay, here is a very difficult question. How many people here believe that humans have caused global warming, which is resulting in and will result in climate change? How many people believe this? Yes, this is easy. The question is, why or how do you believe this? And most of us will tell our students, you must listen to the evidence and the arguments, and you must judge this for yourself. This is what we do as science teachers. And I want to convince you that this is not what happens even for you. How many of you have, say you believe in climate, how many have read the entire IPCC report, the International Panel on Climate Change, have read the whole report from cover to cover, looked at all the evidence, understood all the arguments, and based your judgment based on this evidence? No? What about what you say about the nature of science? This is what you are supposed to do, right? The evidence is far too much for you to master. If you are given the predictions from the climate change models, and they show what it is supposed to be, and this is the real data, I think we have tested the hypothesis, and this shows from the testimony of a climate change scientist to the US Congress. we must now reject the hypothesis as wrong. But you know not to do this, yes? The extent of sea ice for these two dates has actually increased rather than decreased. This is falsified idea, and if you teach about falsification as part of the nature of science, then you should say, oh, but climate change is not real. But I don't think you would, and you would not be well advised to do so. Common sense plausibility tells us that if there is snow in Washington, D.C., or Sao Paulo, oh, this is, how can this be? This chill, this is, you said global warming and it is colder. This is one of our first challenges, and this is a phrase we have not introduced in science education much, epistemic dependence. About knowledge, we all depend on experts, on scientific experts. That's how we know about climate change. And this will be central to how we communicate about science or climate change. And the first question is, which expert? Who is an expert? Michael Crichton, science fiction writer, very distinguished author of Jurassic Park, yeah? He does not believe in climate change. Should we listen to him because he is a good scientist? Steve Malloy, founder of the website junkscience.com, acknowledged as a very good science. Should we listen to him? He doesn't believe in climate change either. But I think you know maybe not to trust these individuals. Here we have 3 Nobel Prize winners who all say that humans are not causing climate change. Should you believe them? Because they are scientists. They are Nobel Prize winners. But maybe you know that their expertise is not in climate change. It is in quantum physics and semiconductors. So their claims don't really matter. And the same for these distinguished scientists, leaders of major scientific institutions. Just because they say this doesn't mean we believe it. Even someone who is an environmental expert does not necessarily represent, because what we care about is not individual expertise, but the consensus. So this is an important benchmark. But we also know we must be very careful about who reports and what we hear about a scientific consensus. So those 2 other individuals, Fred Singer and Fred Seitz, organized these documents to be signed by hundreds of individuals, tens of thousands of individuals, who all say we do not believe in the science of climate change. But they are weathermen, dentists, people who work for the oil company, and even though they present this as a consensus, it does not mean it is the consensus. Some dead people, yes. Yeah. So, all this is to help us, remind us that the information of science does not come to us directly, often not directly even from the scientists themselves. Science information is mediated, or the media, the news media. And this is where misinformation happens. And it's a very complex process, and we need to dissect it and understand it. So an important element is, besides epistemic dependence, that we depend on the experts, we must now understand the nature of trust. Why do we trust someone? Not about making moral statements, not about leading the country, not about keeping a promise to us, but specifically about knowledge. And we must examine this from a social perspective, not just from the evidence and the arguments. So one of the things that is included is a very common thing, is a conflict of interest. Conflict of interest? All these people represent industries or political ideologies that benefit from misleading you. So this would be a central thing. Many of you already know this, but do the students know this? This is part of our challenge. Along the way, this will introduce us to conceiving science education and science communication, I hope, in a different way. Normally, we think of the teacher and the student, the knowledge, person who gives the knowledge, and the person who receives the knowledge. And the student must be a good student by simply honoring and respecting and listening to what the teacher says. But in educational theory, we now know that the mind is very complex, and it doesn't just absorb and receive information, it constructs information. So we must take this idea into society and think about the construction of scientific knowledge with citizens and consumers. Yeah? Think of all the information that these students absorb. They are texting with their friends, and they are flashing by the ads. And they're, oh, that is a nice video, I will watch that. And then there are more ads. And there are the politics about the report. And somewhere along there, there might be something of science, but there will also be something that is not science, that is trying to look like science. So this is the perspective that we must adopt. And many of these sources will have a conflict of interest, and they are non-credible. So here are two reports on climate change. They look very professional and almost the same, and if you open them and go page by page, they will look very similar. One of them is the IPCC report. The other is the NIPCC report, the Non-Governmental International Panel on Climate Change, and it was made to look like the original to deceive. And the people who sell lawn equipment and services, they want to tell you that your green grass lawn is ecologically good for the world, produces oxygen, photosynthesis, oxygen, etc. This is wrong. Okay. So, you may not have been aware, but you do not believe climate change is real because of the evidence or the arguments. Although the scientists believe it for that reason, at least individual scientists believe the evidence in their own field, and even the authors of the IPCC report depend epistemically on each other to be able to create this report as a group. So we trust the IPCC. We trust their expertise. We trust the process that it has gone through to make sure that the conclusions have been read by other people and that they say, yes, that is good. They have been critical of each other and arrived at a consensus. And finally, we trust the media to have reported that consensus to us genuinely, honestly, faithfully. This is a very different view from what we normally teach about the nature of science. And this involves a lot of communication, trust, and flow of information. This is not taught in science education, but if we want people to understand and believe in the science, this is the structure that we must deal with. So that is what we will be addressing today and the next 2 days. Here is another way to structure this for us to think about the structure from a bird's eye perspective, not from the consumer confused by everything. We all know about how science works. We take empirical phenomena, we collect data and evidence, we make graphs, and we publish a scientific paper. We go to conferences, we put it on archive, etc. We get criticism for our proposals, and they create a scientific consensus. Most science education stops here. Yeah? And it will be not too difficult to add the problems of how scientists interact with each other. This is all conventional science teaching, but we are now talking about science in the wild, science that is not regulated or vetted directly by scientists, but only by the media. So a simple linear view, like, oh, we make the claim and the consumers understand it. And we just must be clear and use elementary language. But it is more complicated because there are imitators of science, mimicry, that are trying to deceive them, so they must understand how to tell which is which. And to make matters worse, they can just press their retweet, resend, and send it on. So the social media is also part of the problem. So from that organization, I have organized 10 specific concepts or competencies that students need to learn about science media literacy. Starting with the context, so they must understand this notion of that they depend on other people for knowledge. Other people know more than we do in all kinds of things, and we must figure out how that works. When we look at a scientific claim, we must understand that we're not just, how do I feel about that? Well, I don't feel comfortable about the world falling apart, so I won't believe in climate change. But there are people who believe this, so we must understand this notion of when do we need to take this posture to be clear about things, and then this goes very deep to studies about what is knowledge at all. So how many people know the work of Schomer or Hoffer, Sinatra on epistemic cognition or epistemological beliefs? Okay, this is very deep and fundamental about how do students think about knowledge itself, and how does that influence how they work in a classroom. Okay, the next things are about the media, the mediation, and we must talk about the old-fashioned way of journalists who filter the information for us, traditionally. But now with social media and the internet, who needs to read a newspaper? Just Google it, yeah? That's simple. But to do that effectively, you must be able to identify who is a genuine expert and not. You must be able to detect deception. And we must understand how the technology and social networks influence how we receive information and what we believe. Okay. And then finally, there is the individual component. So you are all familiar with confirmation bias? Yes? You tend to believe what you already believe, and you say, oh, well, that doesn't agree with what I already know, so it must not be true. But we must make students sensitive, help them to understand that they are victims to that, just like all of us. And that there are other problems with how our minds work that the people who make disinformation use to deceive us. And finally, because of that, it is important to understand that everyone agrees. The idea of consensus, especially among scientists. So these are what the lessons for the next several days will be focusing on. So with that, this is our overview of what the problem is and where we are heading. And now if you have more, based on that, if you have more questions like, I hope you relate this to climate change, or, but what about this? We can add to the questions that we already wrote. So people want to add some more now? Yes? No? We'll wait just a minute, so if you want to add another question, you can do that. Okay, and if you need to finish, you can just add some more. Okay, here is our preview of the activities which have been designed to use in a classroom to teach about these one or more of these 10 competencies. And we will go through them and experience them as we hope a science classroom might do that. So has everyone gotten the URL for the course web page? Is there anyone who has not? Okay, we'll make sure that we get that. This is all listed there for you to review. You will be able to download every activity as a PowerPoint and or as a PDF that you can also present. And the corresponding readings, most of them are very short because they are for teachers. They are not, the first two papers on the list are academic scholarly papers for you as teachers to read as background. The rest are mostly for other teachers, so you can use these. So our first activity will be about Fantastic Beasts. How many people have seen the movie? Just all? How many people have seen the Fantastic Beasts movies? Oh, you must see them. They are great. Harry Potter, yes? But we are going to not do the artificial intelligence edition. That's another group. We are going to do the historical version for the Renaissance. Then we will go back to 1721 to think about vaccines and neglect all the things about what people are saying today. And what did they say 4 centuries ago? 3 centuries. We'll do a very quick review on the notion of fact-checking, and then after break, we will do a long exercise on expertise, and before the day ends, we will let you get together in your groups for the first activity tomorrow, which will be the Science Liars game, which I think we are all looking forward to. And then a piece of information from 1990s in the US, an earthquake prediction. It's like, people prepared for an earthquake that never happened. Why? We'll spend a little bit of reviewing information on what people are saying about do your own research. Because this is the attitude. If you don't know something, it's available online and you just Google it, yeah? We can all be experts, it's that easy. But this is a problem. And then we will go back and look at specifically a long extended case that the students themselves will remember from their own experience. So this is history, but it is recent history that they remember. And we will be able to contrast what people thought back then with what we know now, and how sometimes it's different. And then on the third day, we will talk a little bit more about error in science, because this is one of the problems about conceptual change makes science untrustworthy. Well, you can't, if the knowledge changes, why should I trust what you say now? Yeah? So we will look at one of those and some other particular episodes about how the social practices of science work, and we'll finish with a review. Okay, that's our preview of where we're heading. Are there any questions before we dive in? We are going to go back hundreds of years to the early Renaissance, the age of discovery, when people were voyaging from Europe around the world and exploring exotic new worlds and discovering amazing things that they had never seen before. So we must put into our minds what it would be like to have heard about this fantastically huge beast with armor plates and this huge horn on its nose. Who ever heard of such a thing? Unless you happen to be at the port where it was unloaded and you actually saw it and you go, ah, this is real, how could I know this? But if someone had been there and seen it and then told you, would you believe it? Or were they just, you know, pulling your leg? They were teasing you. Hard to know. Crocodiles. Important enough that they were displayed in important places. This is in a church. This is God's creation. This is wonderful. We are in awe of this. And these huge, huge eggs, we know them from ostriches, but from them, they were just, how could a bird be that big? I think that would be very hard to lay an egg that big. A fish with a little quills on the outside. And yet there it is in a little glass case for me to see. So people collected these in rooms called curiosity cabinets. How many people are familiar with this concept of curiosity cabinet? Okay, great. Did you know that Rembrandt, the famous painter, had a curiosity cabinet? They have recreated it from the list of things in his inventory. That room was as large as his painting studio. That's how important it was to him. He spent almost half of all the money that he earned collecting these things because they were amazing. But they raise all these questions about what you can believe. So people are collecting all this information. They are collecting stories from afar. And as you can see, these stories have come from different sources, and yet they seem to agree with each other. That must mean that they are true. These people with faces in their chest, but without heads, with multiple arms. Oh, look at this creature. Someone has said that this is true. Will you believe it? Yeah? So this is to help us think like, well, maybe not everything we hear is true, yeah? So griffins, we learn that these are from Greek myth. They're not real, yes? But then you go to someone, and in their curiosity cabinet, they have a little drinking vessel made out of a griffin claw. What are you to believe? How many would you like, well, maybe the griffins are real. If you have a real griffin claw, it's possible? What do you think? You are 21st century. You don't believe anything. But you must place yourself back then. So unicorns, we know unicorns aren't real, but here's a curiosity cabinet that was drawn. We have the print from it. And there it is. There is the unicorn horn. Are you going to say that's not real? You think this is funny because, no, of course it's not real, but there it is, it's real. How many of you would believe that this was a painting of a real individual, a werewolf man? How many people say, no, that's just imagination, that is fake, falso? How many of you are just not participating? But there are problems. Because we talked about mediation. Things get reported and then retold and retold and retweeted and retweeted and copied and photoshopped and reported. And these are supposedly all exactly the same, but we can see that they are not. So which one is the real version? This makes it difficult to know what is real. So here is a sea dragon. This is by one of the noted naturalists of the time, Elice de How many of you believe that, this was, in fact, drawn from a real specimen? Yeah? This much I can tell you. But how many of you believe that this animal exists in the sea? You are all biologists. You know about how incredible things can be, yes? How many think it's a fake? How do you know? Do you really know, or are you just saying that because you don't want to believe that it's true? This is difficult, yes? Okay, so these are the challenges that, these are not new challenges. This has been with us for centuries, these kinds of challenges. So Aldrovani published this creature that he had received specifically so that he could comment to his readers on how it was a fake, and that it was created from using a manta ray, skate, the sea creature that's flat like a shark, and that it had been snipped and changed and then dried to look like this. But he understood that this is what they had done. And he wanted to warn people, like, don't believe everything you see. So there's Aldrovani. Okay, here is a map that was created by Olaus Magnus to present to the Pope in Rome. I think maybe you can see Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. This is Scandinavia, and all the oceans around it, the seas around it. And if you look closely, you see lots of amazing, amazing creatures, these things as large as ships with tusks. But look, there is someone actually on the back building a campfire. Oh, how many are you going to dismiss this because this is like not believable? Yeah, this is the imagination of someone trying to impress the Pope. But we know that whales are real. And we know that people have actually been able to land on the back of a whale floating on the island. I don't know if they built the fires or not, but they thought that it was an island, and it wasn't. So, amazing things. An Ursi alba, a white bear? This is incredible. But we know that there are white bears. There are polar bears. So this is like, oh, things we can believe, things we can't believe. Another thing with two large spouts and the pointed nose and the tusks again, and the other thing biting into it, smaller. Would you believe this? And here is a version that was made for a big fancy party in Florence with the garden and this big, huge fish with the fountain spouting out of it for all the guests. This was just for the guests, yes? Or is it true? Look at the name, Balena. Do you know this? This is a baleen whale. Yeah? Orca, killer whale. So they're not very good drawings, but these are real creatures. And here's another one, Sisyphus. Are you going to believe this? With a little thing around a collar and its fancy thing. How many people think Sisyphus is real? How many people think it was imagined for the Pope? Yes, exactly. We are not from around those seas. We don't know this creature. But if we have the name, we now know, yes, these things exist. So this is very hard to tell, yes? Even if we have some background knowledge. So now we know a lot of these things are real, but what about this creature with the spiral? markings and the big fan color sea dragons that's larger than ships. Maybe not. So here's another person who collected stories from all over because people were out voyaging and bringing back information, and the idea was to document it all so that everyone could understand it. Well, not a very good drawing, but this is Tucano, see? And this is probably a walrus. Again, they probably didn't see it very well, they probably didn't remember it very well. And the elephant, yes, it's an elephant. But in this same book, the very same author, he presents these to you. Should you believe these as true because you know the other ones are true? This is difficult, yeah? I mean, we at least know that we think of him as a credible author, a credible source. Oh, now here's a difficult, can you imagine an adult with a little mini human sticking out of its chest? Okay, now we need to vote again. Is this true or false? How many people say it's true? How many people say it's false? Imagine. Yes, this is a difference of opinion because it's difficult. But I can now show you some evidence from more recent times when we have photographs, and it's like, oh, maybe, yes, this was true. Yeah? We just think of those people as ignorant. So we know about the conjoined twins, yes? But what about a two-headed individual? Is this possible? Maybe? Or yes, it is possible. Yes, it is possible. How many of you know the Hensel twins? They are from my state in Minnesota. So. They are older now, and they have their own reality TV show, and they make lots of money. But again, there are all these other things about these creatures that have been reported multiple times so that people tend to believe in them. So these are the challenges that faced. And we talked about the werewolf man, and most of you said you believe this to be true. And it is, in fact, well documented. This is Petros Gonzalez. He came from Tenerife, the Canary Islands, and was brought to the royal court in Paris. And he had children, and they also had hairy faces. One of them was given as a gift, given as a gift, from one of the members of court in Germany to a member of court in Italy as a sign of their respect for, like, oh, you can have my court here. So, and here is a more modern version of hypertrichnosis. So, I want you to take a few moments to discuss in groups of 2 or 3, maybe 4. Based on this, looking at all these cases of fantastic beasts in the Renaissance, which factors can you identify that might be important to judging the credibility of claims about those beasts, scientific claims? And are there any lessons that we can take away for media literacy today? Okay? Clear topic for conversation? Okay, then let's talk. So I think one of the things which you have implied is that people often think they know more than they do, and that this contributes to them being able to believe in things like, oh, I know enough to make a judgment on this. So this is a concept of epistemic humility, admitting when other people know more than you do. And this is very difficult for everybody, even us. But this is one of the things that, in a sense, is part of understanding about epistemic dependence, epistemic trust, and epistemic humility. Being able to acknowledge, like, I don't want that to be true, I don't think it's true, but the experts say that it's true, so I should probably believe it anyway. Yeah, so this is good, yeah. Algo mais?
Oh, now I'm shy. Was also about the consilience of evidence. Like, if you have multiple evidence, they should not be too similar, so it's not a copy. It could be a copy, but different enough for you to know that the first person didn't saw what the second did, but they are trying to represent the same thing or phenomenon or creature.
And you all know about consilience, yes? This term? Okay. And this is a standard concept even within science, yes? I did this experiment, but someone else replicates it with a little bit differently, and then they publish this and say, this gives us confidence in this funny subatomic particle, whatever. So this is good, yeah. Okay, so here is your quiz to take home. Now we have a photograph, yes? Not the drawings, but a photograph. Is this real or not? Because we know there are giant squid, yes? We all know this. But is this a real giant squid? This is a giant squid. I'm not going to tell you the answer. You will have to look it up. So, oops. There is, oh. So, on the web page, there is the URL, and some people with some browsers I think need to add /index.html at the end. But if you go here, you will get to the artificial intelligence edition, and you can start looking at modern images. And these will make it more fun. Which of these are real? Red-faced monkey? Monkey? I took this photo in the last. This is an umbrella. my consultation? Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So now you are equipped with one. Okay. We're going to start another class now. And we are going to go, again, back into the past to a faraway, a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. I think Turkey, Constantinople, this is a galaxy far, far away, yes? At least for our students it might be. So, and we are going to look at this question about vaccines, and we know that there is much controversy today. But I want to take you back to Constantinople, which was the center of the Eastern Church. And the British sent an ambassador there, and the ambassador's wife was Lady Mary Wortley Montagu. And here she is in all her splendor. Now, we need to understand a little bit about Lady Mary. It may not look it from this picture, but she was ravishing. She was a real beauty and an allure to men. And there was a painting made later, but based on a real episode where she toyed with the very famous poet Alexander Pope and spurned his advances. But this is what it meant for a lady of nobility at the time. Her only asset, certainly not political power, was her beauty. And Lady Mary cherished her beauty. But at some point, she succumbed to smallpox, and her face became pockmarked even when it healed, and she had to wear a mask in public because she was embarrassed that she had lost her beauty. On top of this, she had a brother who died of one of the very epidemics that swept through London at the time. So she went to Turkey, and she went to the Turkish baths. She was amazed at all of the women had absolutely no disfigurement from smallpox. Why? Why did they escape this? And she learned that there was a procedure known as variolation, and that at one given time during the year, they would get together, and some of the old women would come to a group of young children, and anyone else who was interested who had not yet had this procedure, and they would have a small nut shell with the pus from the pox, the pustules. And they would take a little bit on the head of a pin, they would scratch you where you chose to be scratched, this is important, and they would put a little bit in that thing, and then you would be a little sick for a few days, but everybody would get together in the same place and they would be sick together. It's like, being in quarantine with your lover or whatever. And at the end of the day, they all recovered. And this is what they said prevented this from happening widely. This does not sound like good medicine. It is certainly not based on Galen and the Four Humors. Yes, Galen and the Four Humors, which we all know is good medicine, yes? This is 1721. So, the question became for Lady Mary, because she had come to Turkey with her son, and he is now 4 years old. She loves her son. She doesn't want him to be disfigured. She doesn't want him to die. Would you, as Lady Mary, based on the information that you had about this this technique, which has been unknown to England, not tested in any way that you know about, but they have been doing this for generations. And there is the proof, looking at the women in the spas. Would you have your son undergo this procedure? Do you believe that the procedure is credible? Now you have to take into consideration, think about what you have to take into consideration now. Some evidence, reported evidence, can you believe the person who's reporting the evidence? Are their stories about their own culture credible, or is this just folklore, wives' tales that has been traded down? But you have seen the women in the spa, and many people talk about this. They all believe this. So is it true because they all believe it? Okay? Let's take a break for you to get in small groups and decide, you, Our Lady Mary, will you variolate your son? And why? What is the basis for the information that you believe or do not believe? That's the important criterion. Okay? Go. Okay. Let's come back to the class. So let's just see by a show of hands, how many people have decided that they will variolate their son? How many people have said that no, they are going to be cautious and wait? Oh. This is a very difficult issue, yes? People on both sides. So I will let you know what happened, yeah? She did have her son variolated, but rather than trust the native healers who did this to him, she had it done by a physician that had come with her from England to help with the family. So she basically only trusted the Western doctor to do the procedure, even though she trusted the procedure. Interesting way to do this, yeah? Okay. So there she is, with her son having been variolated. So after he spent his time as an ambassador, 4 years, 6 years, she went back to England. And she started telling all her friends about the wonderful thing that would happen with variolation. And you can imagine, like, now there are no women to observe, and there is no community to talk to. They are just trusting her. But of course, she is nobility, and so she is, in a sense, obliged by society to be honest, at least. She can't just fabricate a story for her friends, so they have to believe that what she is telling, she believes to be true. And there is her son, and he's still alive. So, the story unfolds. Lady Mary has another child, a daughter this time. And when the daughter becomes old enough to be variolated, she goes to the doctor, Professor Dr. Maitland, and says, "Will you do this procedure for me again?" And what do you think he says? "I don't know. I have all these colleagues watching me. I'm not sure that I want to give up my profession and the trust of all my patients by doing this foreign procedure from people who are not Christian. I don't think you can trust the people who are not Christian." Does that sound familiar? I don't think we can trust these people because they are just not trust. I know I did this for your son, but this was special. And I don't know if I am going to do this again. And lady, oh, but you did it before. We know it is okay. So please, 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 will you do this? So now I must ask you to be Dr. Maitland. You are back in England. You did this before. Will you do this again? Why or why not? What is the evidence or the testimony that you are relying on? What are the factors in your decision? Okay? So you are fresh from your first discussion, but now we have to switch to Dr. Maitland, and now your professional concerns really kind of like the standards maybe need to be a little bit higher now. I don't know. You decide. Okay? Get back in your groups and see how you feel now as Dr. Maitland doing this procedure a second time. Okay? Okay. Let's check in. So, the situation has changed and you are now Dr. Maitland. How many people will honor Lady Mary's request and variolate her daughter? How many people are going to say, no, the doctors are too much of a threat? This is a difficult decision, yes? There's lots of things to consider. And this is what makes, as teachers now, this is what makes a good discussion question when both sides have lots of good reasons and you need to probe the reasons to be able to have a good discussion. Okay. And now, of course, you want to know what the right answer is. Yes? All students want to know. Yes, but what's the right answer? Well, there is no right answer. There is only history. Dr. Maitland did agree to variolate the daughter, but with a provision, a qualification. He invited other notable physicians, including Hans Sloane, who was the president of the Royal College of Physicians, to observe, to see what he was doing so that his professional reputation would be not tainted. And they all worked together and made the observations together and made sure that they tended to the daughter to see that she was safe. So there was a very important qualification that said, but we must involve the other peers. This is beginning to think about, like, it's not just my judgment, it's everyone's judgments that matter. Okay. Well, based on this new thing and its success, many of Lady Mary's friends, women, of course, decide to have their children variolated, even though they are members of the royalty, and even though the doctors have not yet approved this as a legitimate therapy operation. Now, among Lady Mary's friends is Caroline, the Princess of Wales. This is now royalty. Lady Mary was really an important person. And she's chatting, of course, with Caroline. Oh, you must have the children, the royal children, variolated. Well, now you can guess what comes next, yes? You are all Caroline, and you must decide, well, okay, it worked with the son, it worked with the daughter, but this is the royal family. And are you going to let that happen? Hans Sloane, your physician, and Maitland, who is also part of the royal family, of course, has more than one physician, yes. And they both said, yes, we believe it is a safe procedure, but, you know, this is your decision. And some of the other doctors in London are saying, we do not have enough proof. Where is the evidence? Where's the beef? Yeah? So now as Lady Caroline, you must decide, once again, whether or not you will have your children variolated. Okay? Is this a good question? Yes? What has changed? But now we have more evidence that it's effective too, right? That it was safe and effective. Maybe. Because we haven't deliberately exposed these children to smallpox to see that they don't get it. Do you think we should do that? Do you think we should deliberately expose the children to the disease to see if the test was successful? What do you think? Well, we will come back to that later. Okay, Lady Caroline. Okay. As Lady Caroline, the princess, how many are going to say this is progressive medicine? This is we are going to lead the country, and I'm going to have my children variolated. How many people have decided to do this? Okay. How many people have decided, no, this is the royal family. We don't do those kinds of things? And I think how many people said, it's more complicated, there's another, yes. Okay. And you want to know what really happened? Yes, and she did. She had several children. I believe, I haven't checked this, 3 daughters and 3 sons. But of course, Caroline cannot make this decision herself because this is the royal family. So what matters is what the king thinks. And the king thinks we need more evidence. But we can collect more evidence. And so he offers a pardon to prisoners who are condemned to death in the famous Newgate prison to have this procedure done to them. And if they survive, they will be exonerated and will be set free. And if it doesn't, well, they were going to die anyway. At least this is what the king would say. Do you think this is ethical? Do you think that these inmates could make an informed choice on their own? This is very close to with slaves, yeah? Or with the nursemaids, whatever. So the king, because Hans Sloane, the doctor, participated in it, he instructs Hans Sloane leads this investigation. There are 6 volunteers. They are all given the procedure. And one of the 6, a woman, is forced to then sleep in the same room with someone who has smallpox, just to make sure it really works. And all the prisoners survive. And the king is true to his word. So this was the Hans Sloane and the Newgate prison experiment. This is very famous historically. But Caroline says, but these were adults. I think we should try this with children. So they tried this on orphans from a local orphanage. They did not give their permission. They were not adults. They didn't have to give their permission. But these children also survived. And as a result, all the royal children were variolated? No. The daughters were variolated, but not the sons. We are not going to tamper with the royal lineage. So if this is what you thought, this is this was, even with all this, now this is essentially scientific proof, and now you as modern people can think about a sample size of 6. But at least there was not, immediate response oh, they all died. So this became a controversial thing, But now that some of the royal family have been violated, this adds a lot of credibility to this procedure in the royals, among the elite in London. And some of them say, yes, okay, well, it has come out okay, and you've done this experiment, and now I believe this. But the Royal College of Physicians is still unwilling to endorse this as a procedure that everyone should do. And it becomes quite controversial. Maitland, now that there is some evidence, publishes a book about how this inoculation procedure really works, and he becomes a strong advocate, as opposed to being very cautious earlier. Now he feels like he can defend this procedure, and he publishes a book defending this, and then he gets a lot of criticism, people publishing other books in a sermon, so the people are saying, William Wagstaff, physician at the distinguished St. Bartholomew's Hospital, says, "Posterity will scarcely be brought to believe that a method practiced by only a few ignorant women amongst an illiterate and unthinking people, the Turkish, should, on a sudden and upon slender experience," you call 6 people an experiment, "so far obtain in one of the most learned and polite nations in the world, England, as to be received into the royal palace." So he is criticizing based on gender and culture, and saying that this procedure, even if it is proven effective, should not be followed. And this is how people respond to information or scientific information. These other contexts really matter. And you can probably say, well, I don't know if that was the right decision or not. And of course, we all have the advantage of hindsight to know, like, this was, the women carried this knowledge forward because it was incumbent upon them in their gender to have done so in their culture. And they were not an ignorant culture. They paid attention to their experience. They just didn't publish scientific papers on it. That's legitimate. So the procedure did not gain widespread acceptance at the time because there were lots of doubts. There were epidemics that spread through London. Thousands of people died in the 1930s, 40s, and early 50s. And it wasn't until Edward Jenner developed another procedure, vaccination, based on cowpox, that the procedure gradually became to be used, but in a very different context. But this was the difference between people who were variolated and people who were not. And we now know it to be a very effective procedure and one that has saved a lot of lives. So, we'll take a moment now for you to discuss in your groups. What have you learned about science information and credibility? Credibility of evidence, credibility of testimony, the factors that are involved in credibility, the factors that may be involved in credibility but shouldn't be involved in credibility. So what have you learned that you can take home as a lesson from this historical case? See if you can make a little bullet point list of things that you have learned from this episode. Okay? We'll come back in a minute. Can we bring this to a close for now? We will be taking a break soon, and you can come back and talk about this more if you'd like. So, as students, I could ask you further, of course, to try and apply what you have learned to contemporary cases about people who resist taking vaccines and who say they are unavoidably safe. What is their evidence? How do they think of safety? How do they think of science? And does the story of Lady Mary help us to understand more about how modern science might have something important to say, the role of consensus, the role of experience, understanding that, as is clearly obvious in the historic case, there can be biases. We saw gender, we saw cultural, but maybe now they are religious or political biases, and are we willing to acknowledge those? So you can see that there's an opportunity for us to have another fuller discussion about applying this case to the modern examples. Okay, I want to shift briefly from class mode to teacher-teacher mode. Yes, okay. What I want you to understand now is a little bit about how we put this lesson together. How this is a lesson plan, yes? How did this get put together for it to work the way that it did? So one thing was, we had a historical narrative to follow. And along this historical narrative were various problems that we could pose. Problems that were very real in the historical context, and which we as modern observers can also experience as real problems without a very clear one answer. Because every single time we had debate. So this is what happens. We start with a story, we come to a decision point, and in your discussion you realize there are many different possibilities. And this is what inquiry learning is all about, is exploring all those possibilities. And maybe you came to a decision as a group, and maybe not. The difficult thing in an inquiry lesson is, does everybody have to agree? What do you do next? So in this case, we have the advantage of history to say what did happen. And this allows you some reflection on, like, yes, we said that, and we said that, and we said that. Oh, we didn't say that. That's interesting that we didn't think about that, but historically they did. But that means we end up with one of these threads from the discussion, and then the narrative can take place again to another question, which opens us to many possibilities. We discuss them, pick up the thread with what actually happened. So here are the various decision points that we had discussion on, and you can see how they are threaded together, and that this is now a series of small inquiry lessons that are threaded together by a historical narrative. So this is, from a teacher's point of view, it makes organizing inquiry activities much more manageable, because if you were to do this activity among 4 different classes, period 1, period 3, period 5, period, and they all do different things, the next day, what are my lesson plans going to look like? They will all be different because the classes do different things. But when you have the structure of the historical narrative, we can bring them all back together and we all arrive at the same place. So, are there any questions from a teaching perspective about the activity? Any questions about this? Okay, if there are, we can come up. Okay, we have done a lot of good work already, yes? And we're only halfway through today. But I think it is time for a break, yes? So if you have your questions that you wrote down at the very beginning during our introduction, I'd like to be able to collect those. You are probably not just a little tired and need some water, but a little sustenance. So I have made for the occasion some of my famoso Mexican fiesta bars. So you can all take one of these. And if you like this idea of having something to nibble on during break, then you can sign up and say, well, I'm going to bring something for 10 people tomorrow. Oh, I'm busy tonight, but I can do something for Friday. So we'll make a little list if you want to volunteer, and we'll make sure that we have enough people or whatever to do that. Okay? You like that? Okay. So we will reconvene at 4:30, 4:30? Yes? Okay. So are there any questions that came up during break for us to address about what we have already done so far? Okay. So, I want to give you a brief impression about some of the ways in which educators, not all of them science educators, approach media literacy, not always about science media literacy, as a background for addressing misinformation. In the case of the Fantastic Beasts and the vaccines, we were posing questions about credibility and what can be believed, but for the most part, not worrying about misinformation or deliberate misinformation. And it is important for you as Brazilians speaking Portuguese to know about a distinction in the English literature on this. So in Portuguese, desinformação is everything. But in English, there is misinformation and disinformation. How many people know this distinction? Okay. So misinformation is bad information. But if you do not know the difference and you just tweet this to a friend, you do not know that you are transmitting bad information. That is an example of misinformation. But there are plenty of people out there, the NIPCC, and all those corporations that want you to believe wonderful things about how the oil rig platforms provide environments for the sea life, and this is good that we are making oil in the deep sea regions. This is disinformation, and it is deliberate. So there is an intention to deceive. And this is an important distinction to make. And most of the cases that we care about will be traced back to disinformation. Someone wanted to profit from selling hydrochloroquinone, so they started this thing. Or they wanted some political advantage by making mothers not believe in vaccines. So, let us suppose now that you come, someone has tweeted, to you, WhatsApp, Instagram, and they send you to this website. How are you to decide if you can trust this website? This is similar to the problems we've been talking about, but now we are adding but some of these are deliberately misleading, and how do we know? So This is very similar to what people who teach critical thinking have been trying to convince students to do for years, for decades. And there are methods, and this is an American method that has very simple things. Consider, is it new? Is it relevant? Is the information up to date? Is it relevant to your concerns? Does the person who speaks for this have the intellectual authority to speak for it? Is it accurate? How would you know? But they ask you to say, is it accurate? And what is their purpose? And this spells out something in English, which you may know about. And that is essentially what this is. This is about critical thinking. Critical thinking asks you to evaluate the arguments and the evidence. So this is what has been called by Sam Weinberg and his colleagues vertical reading. You read down the page. You analyze the text that is given to you. Perhaps you click on the About on the web page tab to say, who is this? Oh, he is the head of the such and such institute and such. Oh, that sounds very impressive. Okay. And you look at it, is it professional? Is the URL, does it say .org or .com? If it's .com, well, we know. Yeah. And then you read the claims, the evidence, and you make a decision. The point is, this is what leads you astray. So Sam and his colleagues provide an alternative, which is called lateral reading. How many people have encountered this technique or before? Just a few. Okay. So this is based on what fact checkers do. If you want to check the facts online, well, do what the professionals do, yes? That makes very good sense. So the first thing the professional fact checker would do, and I think they were probably very busy last night, they kind of like glance very quickly at what they have to sort of see what claim it is and what the group is called. But then they open up a new tab, and they will say things like, so they will take, this website, and they will put in the organization name and maybe the claim, and then they say sources of funding or organization, question mark. So they are now they are not reading what has been presented to them. That is no way to judge whether it is credible or not. You must judge the source that has been given to you. So who is this group, ILSE? What can we learn about them? So you open up the new tab, and this one is from another one about the Heartland Institute, a very conservative think tank based in my hometown that promotes disinformation about climate change. And here they're saying, renewable energy, 100%, this is a myth. No, we should not believe this. But you take that, you put it in Google, and then you scan the results quickly. You don't just click on the first thing. No, you exercise click restraint. Scan the results. You can at least look at the first page and see if there is anything relevant to what you are looking for. Why trust Google? Google is giving you, and this is something you can discuss with students sometimes, is Google trying to help you search for information? No. They are trying to sell you ads. And they want to give you information about the kinds of things that you are looking for, not what you should be looking for. So you must scan to make sure you are getting what you want, and then you click on another tab and you come up, in this case, with the ILSE blog by Marian Nestle that talks about this institute true colors revealed. Well, this is an industry front group, an institute that does research that is paid for by Coca-Cola, Pepsi, sugar industry. So if they produce research that doesn't agree with what they want you to believe, you will never see it because they will never publish it, right? So this is what fact checkers do. And here are some studies that they did with high school students, college students from Stanford University, very high-level institute, university professors, and fact checkers. And how long did it take them to know that the Heartland Institute was not reliable, or ILSI, or other, several examples. So the fact checkers in 50 seconds can say, dismiss this, because they know how to, like, click, Wikipedia says, this is an institution, a partisan institution that is known for climate change denial. We are done. Don't believe them. The university professors, even the university professors, took longer because they are so used to reading the papers and reading the arguments and evaluating them, because this is what we have been taught to do as scholars. And it works if it's in a peer-reviewed journal and you can trust the source to be giving you a legitimate argument and legitimate evidence. But if not, you look sideways. So eventually, the other people got around to it by like, maybe I should not be reading what's on the web page, but looking somewhere else. So, and another example, again, the fact checkers were able to get to the answer much more quickly. So what we have here is a very, very simple technique, yes? How do you use your browser? How do you read? You can be a fact checker, and by looking at the source of information rather than at the information itself and trying to leverage this to your, oh, I will be the expert. Like, no, this is not an expert. I don't need to believe them. Yes? Yeah, that's okay. I've been talking about these two examples of web pages that we looked at, and these are other web pages that they used in their tests. The source isn't important. It's the comparison of how much time it took. And the fact checkers are very efficient because this is their business. So if we could teach students to do this kind of fact checking, we are done, yes? All you need to do is let them do this, and they can fact check everything themselves. Sound good? No? It is very effective for some things, but we need to get students in the mind to think about fact-checking. They may need advanced fact-checking skills, and et cetera. So this is a very common approach to misinformation that's being widely spread right now. But what we are doing is talking about science media literacy, not just about fact-checking. And to do that, we need to understand the whole picture. We need to understand where the information comes from, how it became legitimate, and how every step along the way preserves the truth or the facts so that when we get them, we can believe them. And it's only the last step where the fact-checking is ever really effective. So this is the bird's eye view. And you will see this described in one of the required readings that I co-authored with Dietmar. For us to think about the experts who we ultimately must trust, and the fact that this information is mediated through podcasts, through television documentaries, through newspapers and magazines, through various entertaining websites, through all the social media, and eventually reach us. And it tells us how important in the past this role has been of being the gatekeeper who can probe the scientists can say, they will go check another scientist to say what the first scientist said to see if they agree. They have good professional contacts. They understand enough of the science that they can do a little bit of filtering. They change it into language which the rest of us can understand. And so these are the examples. This is the team from the Washington Post that broke the Watergate scandal. So example of gatekeeping. Once you understand that that is the old thing, then you can understand that there are lots of non-experts, false experts, imitators of science, who try to get into the news media, maybe before, but the gatekeepers kept that from happening. But now, with the internet, bing, 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 direct to consumers, you can save lots and lots of money by going to this one. So to see that this is what's going on, we have lost our system of filtering reliable messages. The internet is great for democracy, maybe, but it opens up the world to deception and fake experts. And worse, once this information gets to the consumers, they're not isolated individuals. They quickly forward it on to their friends, and it magnifies. And now we know, for example, from an analysis of hundreds of thousands of tweets over several years, that lies, false information on social media, on Twitter, before it became X, X, formerly known as Twitter, yeah, or Twitter not to be, well, whatever. Twitter. Lies travel faster. People are more willing to tweet a lie than they are other. It travels farther, that is, more generations of retweets, and brought more widely, so branching to more and more people. So the effects of lies are stronger than the effects of truth, so we really need to think about. This is part of what happens when we think about the big picture. And we already knew that social media was a problem, but it's helpful to put it into a large framework and to help students think about that as well. So we need to move from fact-checking skills to these other kinds of understanding. What is the social architecture by which we trust one another and the ways in which knowledge is conveyed? The credibility, such as we've done in our earlier exercises, expertise, a little bit, which we've done and we'll do next, to talk about where these things come from and whether or not you can, in fact, trace them back to their sources, because sometimes they arrive, where did this come from? And I am now adopting a policy like, if I don't know where this came from, I'm not even going to bother. It may be interesting, it may be entertaining, it may be informative, but if I didn't initiate the search, I'm not going to trust anything that lands. It's like someone sends you a piece of mail or spam on your texting, your messages. So that is the transformation or the difference that we are trying to do in this class. Okay, so let us now start on another activity. Very simple title, Inquiry into Expertise. And this was designed for high school students, so it'll be, we need to reframe it just a little bit as we go along. But this is the question you pose for your teens, your high school students, say. So within your class, we don't all know each other now, so it's more difficult. Like, who can help you with your science homework? And they will probably all answer like, oh, we know he's the one who will always help you with that. Where do you find a good party this weekend? Some people have this information and some people don't, yeah? If you have a new app on your phone, someone's like, oh, I have that, I will help you, right? But some other people are like, yes, I know you do this, but I wouldn't trust you, right? Who can help in an emotional crisis? So the purpose of posing this question, and I could ask these like, if you had a new search engine, scholarly search engine, that was helping you to find papers on a particular thing, you would go to certain people and not to others, yes? Can you think of other cases of like people amongst your acquaintances, like, I would go to them for this, but I wouldn't go to them for that? So it's important that, in this case, it's important that we start with this notion of like, this is what we do in our everyday lives. Some people provide good information and others don't. So once they talk about people within the class, then we can start talking about people outside the class. Who do you go to get a good cell phone repair? And some of you may now have apartments. It's like, my sink is not working. How do I find a good plumber? Yeah, one that you can trust. So these are examples of pregnancy or sexually transmitted disease, suicidal thoughts, worries about gun violence. These are things that high school students would experience. And again, we get them to acknowledge that some people are more trustworthy than others. And now we start broadening this thing in our own world that we're familiar with to what it means to be outside of school. So I'm going to give you a few moments to list some of the ways in which we rely on experts in our culture, which you rely on experts in our culture. And I've already mentioned one of them. You can write it down if you want and count it as number one. The plumber. Some of you may know how to fix a clogged sink or a more complicated clogged sink, but if the dishwasher breaks down, or the washing machine, the dryer, I can fix the toilet, but not the washing machine. So name some other experts in our culture that have information that you rely on, and which you can regard them as experts. Okay, clear task? Okay, this can be very quick, so just start listing. Go.
Professores.
Jornalistas. Jornalistas.
Aqui a gente falou veterinário, mecânico.
Lawyer. See? Expert? See? Sports commentator. Sports. Told you. Fireman. Others. Illustration. So did anyone mention videographers? Are they experts? Yes. We should let him know that he is an expert. It needs to concentrate. Okay, this is a good list. And it doesn't matter what is really on the list, but we see that it is very diverse. And we can add that. So here is, we just visualize this, and here are the kinds of examples that you might get. Farmers, yes. Bridge welders, I hope so, yes. This is how our society is constructed, yes? We all rely on each other for certain kinds of information. So we can call this the division of intellectual labor. And most people learn in a class about the division of labor, how it's easier if each person specializes in a task and put them together, it's faster and more efficient. And in this case, we also divide our intellectual, our knowledge. We spread it out. The knowledge of our society and our culture is distributed across everything, really. Okay? So, now we can pose the question, especially as the students haven't really thought through this. Are scientists experts? Doctors are experts, yes, and they will use them. So, we won't even get into groups. We'll just start naming all the different kinds of different sciences that provide specialized expertise that one kind of expertise will not necessarily translate into another expertise. Even if I am a Nobel Prize winning physicist and know about quantum mechanics, that doesn't mean that I know a lot about COVID. Yes? But so what are some of these, now we will get the other people who didn't say anything. Just kinds of scientific expertise. Epidemiology. Historians.
Geneticistas. Geneticistas.
Geneticists, speaking for her. Zoologists. Climate scientists. Climatologists. Linguistics. Chemistry. But I think we would not just say chemistry, yes? Organic chemistry. Or most particular, organic synthetic chemistry, or biochemistry. I mean, we see how many different kinds of sciences there are, yes? Is there anyone else who wants to present a particular scientific field? You must say so loudly.
Geography.
Geography.
Ecology.
Biogeography. Paleobiogeography. Paleoethnobiography. Biology. So, yes, there are plenty of scientists. And for someone who is still a teen, they may not have been exposed to all these. And they may not be able to come up with a long list, but whatever list they produce helps us to understand that an oceanographer or a biotech engineer is just like a doctor or a lawyer or a dentist or the person who repairs your cell phone. Only they have a very particular kind of knowledge, not about what I do during the day necessarily, unless maybe I am concerned about vaccines, unless maybe I am concerned about climate change or pandemics, and then it becomes relevant. So this is helping to situate science in our lives in a very real sense and not in a textbook. Yeah. Why do we have scientists? Because we need these specialized forms of knowledge, and we have assigned certain people in our society to do this job for us. Okay? Okay. So this is the general question. When do these experts provide us with knowledge that is better and more reliable than everyday assumptions or other forms of expertise? So we could have a discussion about this, but I will frame it in a slightly different way and allow us to have a good in-depth discussion. When I say expertise, what do I mean? What makes an expert an expert? Yeah? That person on YouTube who just who wants you to believe that they're an expert, but if you have any expertise in that topic, you know, they don't know what they are talking about. Right? So, what makes an expert an expert? This is at the heart of what knowledge is, perhaps more than some demarcation criteria from science by philosophers. This is real knowledge about doctors, lawyers, and divorce attorneys, tax accountants. You want your income tax to be reliable. You don't want the government coming after you. Okay? So what makes an expert an expert? Let's start writing down some criteria for what that means conceptually. Okay? Go. Okay. Most of you have been writing lists, so we want to go around from group to group, get something from each list, and add to the general class list. And this group will obviously say something that like, oh, I wanted to say that from this group. That's okay. So and we'll just go around until we have got things from everybody's list, okay? So, what you think?
Falando de experiência, você pode falar uma só?
Experiência.
Practice.
Prática. Pode falar
desculpa.
em português.
Eu?
Ok, a gente falou aqui validação social.
O nosso foi bem parecido, é reconhecimento por pares, né, institucional também.
O histórico, né, curriculum, and sometimes charisma for the society. Confidence, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Does an expert have to have confidence?
No, but we're talking about what people think.
Okay, so for now, we want to think about how people think about expertise. But if we are an expert panel examining someone to say, does this person have the expertise in our field to be a member of here? What are we looking for? Maybe we are looking for confidence. If they are unsure, then they really don't know what they're talking about. And we should not treat them as an expert. I don't know. What's the result? Thoughts? So we'll just keep on going.
A gente colocou tempo de estudo e a dedicação, que já foi falado. É tempo de estudo e dedicação.
Okay, thanks. We talked about a large base of knowledge on one specific topic, and more than we have a lot of things that are not there. Do I talk them or okay?
Large base of knowledge, but only on a specific topic. I see. Oh, sim.
Em algum momento foi dito aqui possibilidade de criatividade, inovação.
Everyone here? Okay.
A gente também pensou que tem que ter técnica, né? Technique. Technique.
Tem que ter um diploma.
Is the diploma what makes their expertise? If I just, in The Wizard of Oz, if I give the Scarecrow a diploma, Does he have the expertise? I would leave that. Obviously, a diploma is important, but how and why, yeah?
A gente também colocou que não pode ser autodeterminado pela negativa.
A gente colocou interesse, de sempre estar interessado, e vivência também. Prática e vivência, mas outra palavra.
A gente colocou uma resolução e uma capacidade de resolver problemas novos.
Not just having the knowledge, but being able to apply it to a new situation and solve a problem. Should an expert be able, any expert be able to do this? Probably, maybe, okay. But you have more.
No, maybe theoretical knowledge, maybe. I don't know if they mentioned.
Practical knowledge and theoretical knowledge? Yeah, okay. Anything else to add to this list?
Continuously studying and perfectioning your abilities.
Can an expert just sit back and stay an expert, or do they need to continue to update their knowledge? At least most professions, have a requirement for professional development. Are teachers experts? They are usually required to do professional development. Is teaching a form of expertise? Absolument. Okay. This is a very good list, yes? So when we say expert, we can break this down into specifics to say what we mean. And this is helping us now to understand what it means. Why would we trust the doctor? Why would we trust the dentist or the lawyer or the car mechanic or the bridge welder or the airplane pilot? Because of these things. Yes, they have to have gone to school. They probably should have some theoretical knowledge so that if they get a practical problem that's new, they have some way to solve problems. They must be innovative or creative in rearranging that knowledge to apply it to new situations. And I am guessing a lot of this because I know what can be there, and I hear little bits. So, yes, we will get a picture of this. So here is a typical list of what students might come up with. Your students will not necessarily come up with this exact list. Is that important? No. It is important to have a good list, but if you know the list and you are leading a discussion and they are speaking in the same language that you are, then you can sometimes pose a question that says, what about memory? Is this important? Oh, yes, yes. Or, no. Okay? This is a concept of how we conceive knowledge. And we can see that some of it is abstract and some of it is very concrete. So, this is helpful now. And we can apply this, if we want to science, to say what makes a particular scientific expert. Yes, you knew this was coming, right? So, can we come up with a very quick list of what makes a scientific expert an expert in science as opposed to anything else? Does that help? This will be shorter, but we could just like try to identify a couple things very quickly. Okay? Well. Okay. This was enough for you to think about, and you might give your own students a little bit more time depending on how much time you will devote to this. But here is a kind of a typical list about what we might expect, or we might try to nudge them into thinking about. That they, let's see. How many people had this? That they know about the possible sources of error or things that can go wrong. Among the sociologists, this is for you as teachers, among the sociologists who study expertise, this is becoming one of the key factors. It's not enough for you to know how things should be done. You have to know how they should not be done to avoid catastrophes and errors. That's what people put their trust in you for. You have to know what could go wrong. And it's also important because some people will know a little bit and they think they know enough to get through, but they're not experts because they don't know how they can be so horribly wrong. And that's very important for people who want to pretend that they are making information and judging information for themselves. Okay. So, now just like before, we have solved the problem of expertise, and since we know what makes an expert and a scientific expert, we can all be experts ourselves, yes? These smug pilots, they have lost touch with the regular passengers like us. Who thinks I should fly the plane, eh? So this is the interesting question. Why can we not all be experts in everything? You can't do it all. Nobody can know it all. Although I think I know a know-it-all. Do you know any know-it-alls? The people who know everything, yes? So this is very humbling. This means that neither I nor any of you can know everything, and we must, at some level, accept that we don't know everything. I don't like this. Yeah? I want to know everything. But let us take the opposite attack. What is it that you do know? Yes? What is it, not just what makes an expert, but what makes you an expert in something in particular? Things that other people can or do or should turn to you for. Now, if you are a teen, this is like a lot of working through what do I want to be with my life, yeah? But I want you to just take 3 minutes for you to do an assessment of yourself privately, just by yourself, and you can write this down or not. What am I good at? What do I know? What am I an expert in that maybe I can sell this expertise. I can make a living of this expertise, yes? Yeah, yes. Profit. Okay, so take 3 minutes on your own just to identify yourself as an expert and what you are expert in, okay? I hope this was fruitful reflection. Yeah. I am going to be up all night thinking about this question. So I did not pose these questions explicitly, but you have read them. So this is a very helpful thing for students. So what do you already know? And even if they are high school students, they know something. And other students will turn to them for some things, and they can take, maybe they are very good at playing a musical instrument. They are very good with dogs, football, sports. They've been out there practicing, yes? Boom, boom. But because they are students, there is also a future ahead of them. So this is a way for us as teachers to encourage their personal development and not just their intellectual development, but to see how, in fact, those things can be related, that what they are learning in school might actually be valuable and important and relevant to them. How strange is that? Okay? And of course, this might also help to them to think more about where the science fits in. So the general question that comes from this, from knowing your own expertise, is knowing when do others know more than you do? When is it appropriate to make decisions based on your own knowledge and intuitions? And when might it actually be more reasonable not to trust your own instincts, but to trust someone else's judgment? To give them your hand and ask for a leg up. This is absolutely essential for knowledge to be able to be exchanged in our culture. So, in the introduction, I talked about epistemic dependence and epistemic trust, and I hope now, through this exercise of taking things in small steps, we can see more about how that process begins to work. By understanding from a bird's eye view how the system is constructed. So when I said earlier, we need to go beyond fact-checking to talk about the social architecture of trust, it is by understanding about the nature of expertise and the nature of trust in expertise. And we have one final exercise, which many of you have already started on indirectly, as you can see from the list. Not just what makes them an expert, those are the qualities of expertise, but how do we know if we're not an expert? It's one thing to be on a dissertation committee and to pose the question to the prospective doctor, are you ready to become one of our peers, able to do research on your own, able to have good intellectual judgment, and to make good inferences and recognize good evidence and recognize bad evidence? But if you are not a doctor, how do you know who a good doctor is? If you are not a good auto mechanic, how do you know if they are just cheating you, right? What are the signals or criteria that we use to ascertain expertise, knowing that these are the kinds of things we're trying to get at, but as individuals, we can't always probe that. So, for example, if we know that someone is validated by their peer experts, that might give us confidence that we should have confidence in them as well. So that could be one of the criteria for recognizing expertise. Diploma, any kind of credential. It's not the diploma itself that gives them the expertise, but it is a signal that they have gone through the process and other people have recognized that they have the expertise. Should you listen to anyone off the street who's talking about COVID or the solution to some problem, or should you expect them to have a degree first before you trust them? So, how do we know who is an expert? And this is, again, the criteria for recognizing expertise in a cultural context and extending our trust. Okay? So we will take about 4 minutes for this. Okay? A joint conversation, because I think your groups have probably done a good job. And the You have all reached these good conclusions for yourself, and the wonderful thing about an exercise like this is it is open-ended. We do not have to have an exact list. Any list will do. But if you know the depth of the list of what other students have done, you can make it, help them make it a better list. But it also means that you or anyone else who has not been in this session with us can do this with the students together. They don't have to have the answers already. You work with the students to create this out of our joint experience, because that is partly what the expertise is about, is it's a social construction. But, so let's just find out, how many people put something about a documented track record or portfolio? How many people had that? Good. An advanced degree of training? Yes. Certification, which means that someone has actually tested them? Yeah. Licensing, as in a plumber or someone who must go in and fix your home, that they have accountability through a government license. How many people had this? Yeah? Okay. Peer recommendations? Yes, good. Professional awards or prizes? This is, for when we judge our other experts, this is important, yeah? Positions of leadership, the head of the National Academy of Sciences, yeah? No? Okay. User reviews, when they're valid. So this is why it is interesting to ask this question afterwards. Can these be faked? Can these signals of expertise be gamed? So it is very easy to get user reviews by paying a company to do this for you. So some user reviews, like, that's not very informative. Like others you might read and go, that's someone who used this product or who dealt with these people in the customer service that didn't work. No, I shouldn't trust these people, even if there are 10 5-star reviews. So, and then you can talk about which criteria are most important. Okay, so we are not going to take the time to summarize this today, but you can see how important, after an inquiry activity like this, the best solution is to sit down and put everything back together again. And because of our limited time, we will not be able to do that for everything. Okay, any other questions or comments before we leave this exercise on inquiry into expertise? I hope you enjoyed this. This was largely conceived by a colleague of mine in Hungary, Gabor Zemplén, and we have worked on putting this version together, and it will be published in another couple months. So that is available on the website for you to download. Step-by-step instructions. Okay, so we are getting close to the end.